guess I just want to start off by saying I'm really humbled to have the opportunity to speak to this particular group of people. And I'm really thankful to Troy and the organizers of the event for having us up here today to talk about this topic. So, last year in Calgary was the first time that I'd been to a BIF event in several years. And one of the messages that I heard really early on in the meeting last year that stuck with me and that got repeated a lot is that there's a fork in the road genetically out there. And for whatever reason, that really resonated with me. And it got me thinking about sex semen as Dr. Thalman kind of talked about there in terms of its use as a tool to start to address that fork in the road that we see genetically out there today. You know, and I guess I'm a believer that fork does exist, right? We've got cattle that fit at both ends of the spectrum and do those things extremely well. We got cattle that can make in product extremely efficiently. They can grow rapidly, hang up heavy carcasses, do those things efficiently, high quality carcasses. But those same steers that maybe make it to 1,600 pounds and a 1,000-pound carcass weight, you know, you'd have a hard time convincing me that his sisters, his mates, are the ones that I want in my pasture to be a low input, low maintenance kind of a female. And so I think that fork exists. There's people on both sides of this fork, I think, that do a good job in terms of selecting cattle that excel in their own arenas on those two sides of the fork. And I think Sexcel, or sex semen, I guess, on the whole in the industry, gives us a nice tool to think about actually taking both of those forks at the same time, rather than having to focus our attention on one side or the other. So would you agree with me in terms of whether or not this is you know, the extremes are as far apart as what they are? I think this is a fundamental question to the idea of whether or not you want to use sex semen. And this question is, you know, can you and I agree that you would ideally use a different bull to make your replacement females than the one that you would use to make the highest value feeder calf, and whatever your point is? And I think a lot of people can get behind that statement. There's a lot of folks who've made a good living making cattle that go down the middle of the road and do both those things well for decades. But I think we do have an opportunity, as what Dr. Thalman just said, in terms of being able to maximize efficiency or optimize efficiency in a system by utilizing cattle that are at the extremes in terms of what that fork in the road looks like. You know, again, something that's already been alluded to is kind of our competitive industries out there. The swine industry is really good at this in terms of utilizing both breed complementarity and heterosis. And also using specialized genetic lines, right? It's really common to see a hybrid white line female of some sort who's just really optimized to produce pigs, really optimized to work in a farrowing system, and then she's going to get made into some type of a terminal bull to correct the deficiencies that she's got in terms of end product value. You know, in this particular case, Duroc Group's a good example. In the last decade or so, we've seen a lot of Duroc come back into the swine industry to help correct an issue that they had in terms of carcass quality. And in this particular case, that bull probably injects almost all the carcass quality that you see in swine today. And so I think that's a really good flexible example of a system. And again, I'm not advocating that we become like the swine industry. I just think there are lessons here that we can learn. Clearly, there's really big differences in production environment and litter size, all those types of things. An example that hits a little closer to home is the dairy industry, right? Again, a topic that's already been talked about a little bit, but sex semen and terminal beef bulls have absolutely transformed the way the dairy business is done in terms of genetics today. And really, that's all happened within the last decade, right? There's a maternal unit who was absolutely built to do a very specific thing really well, and that's to get pregnant and produce milk, right? And her byproduct for a long time was a little bit of a drag on the industry, but we've transformed that byproduct because we're able to make more than enough heifers for what the dairy industry needs with sex semen, and that's allowed them an opportunity to create a different source of revenue from those terminal crossbred calves. I think it has to feel like there's a really good opportunity for us with that female sex semen in particular to be able to look at a system to take take advantage of both sides of this genetic fork in the road pretty effectively, and maybe look at optimizing the system a little more than what we already have. And I think a key to this fork in the road is really thinking about efficiency on the two sides of the fork. If you think about maternal efficiency, for me, maternal efficiency is driven much more by inputs, lower inputs, better fertility, more longevity, those kinds of things drive efficiency at the maternal level. Where on the terminal side of this equation, we can override a lot of input with a lot of output, right? We can plug in just maximum growth, maximum carcass rates, and overtake a lot of that input cost that would go into making that end product. And so I think, again, just to emphasize that there are big differences, but I think we've got a system that we can work these into and be effective at. For us, this 60-40 concept is something that we put in front of our producers for a few years now. Basically, it's the idea that because we know that sex semen is going to work better in those cows that have displayed estrus at the time of insemination, if we apply sex semen in kind of a commercial scenario, if you will, where we know cows are probably going to get bred on fixed time AI, if we synchronize those cows, use an estrotect or some type of an estrus detection aid, we can inseminate somewhere around 60% of those cows, should give us enough replacement females for the entire herd. So here again, if you had 100 cows, approximately 60 of them are going to get a straw of female sex semen. That works out pretty nicely with a lot of our estrus synchronization protocols that we utilize today in the beef industry. The 7-day co-sync and cedar program, for instance, is pretty often going to yield you an estrus response of somewhere in the range of 60 to 65% of your cows showing estrus by the time of fixed time AI. And so, you know, I would encourage you not to get hung up on the percentage. If you disagree with percentage here in terms of what you would need to use to make your replacements, that's fine. I think the concept here is to apply something that is commercially acceptable as a way of getting sex semen into our cow herd. The remainder of the cows in this scenario would get bred to a more terminal focused type of an AI bull, something that's focused on your end product, and then you'd clean up with terminal focused sires here. And so that would eliminate the need to have kind of an all-purpose sire on farm if you went about it in this particular way. Some of the features and benefits of this is I think it really works within a lot of different estrus synchronization protocols. However you want to go about this, I think is an effective way to leverage it. You know, I feel like this applies a level of reproductive efficiency selection by taking those cows that respond to the estrus synchronization protocol are probably going to be the ones that calved earlier, better body condition score, those females that are working within your system. It ensures that your replacement heifers are going to be born early in the calving season, right? And we heard Dr. Weber tell us about that this morning, just that value of having those females that are born early in the calving season, that then get bred early and calve again early in the next calving season. Applying a system like this can ensure that every one of your replacement heifers can be born in the first 2 weeks of the calving season. Again, it lets us incorporate some genetic extremes into the system for complementarity's sake. For me, it's a clear template to implement crossbreeding within a farm where you may not have the ability to own bulls of different breeds. For me, I think, again, the concept here is about making the right calf from every mating versus making the most matings as possible. And one thing that I will say here is that someone over here already pointed out that we're not going to maximize break rate here, or conception rate to AI, if you will. I think that as extension people, as educators, as a lot of us have been, a reproductive physiologist myself, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people that we need to maximize preg rate. We need to maximize conception rate. But I do think there's value in making the right pregnancy. And I think that as we start to think about making a replacement female, a cow that can save us money every year of her productive life, we can start to see the offset that might create in terms of calf performance. So, you know, from a standpoint of this concept, we wanted to get out and work with somebody and try to demonstrate this concept somewhere. The Bear Ranch is in central Montana, Martinsdale, Montana. This is a ranch, a large commercial ranch, upwards of 40,000 acres, 900 Semen cows, 900 plus cows, if you will. They retain their own replacement heifers and develop those. The ranch is owned or is in a trust that's managed by U.S. Bank. Part of their sort of constitution is that they need to do some extension type work, some research and education of ranchers in the region. And so we worked with the Bear Ranch for the last 4 years now on a demonstration project, the 60/40 concept. This is kind of a schematic of the way we laid that project out. Really, the project was essentially to demonstrate the differences between kind of a conventional all-purpose middle of the road approach of using the same bulls across all the cows and the 60/40 concept that we're proposing here. So essentially, we tried to balance those cows. We stratified them into treatment groups based on body condition score, cow age, BCS, calving date, everything we could control for. We tried to control for and assign those treatments before breeding. We synchronized everybody with a 7-day co-syncing cedar protocol. Fitted them with Tech patches when we pulled cedars and gave blue lights. As those cows came through the chute then, depending on what treatment they were in, obviously the control cows here are group 1, just got conventional semen. We alternated, we randomly bred those cows, alternated 10 units of one bull, 10 units of the next. In the other treatment group though, the first 60% of the cows that came through with an activated patch got a straw of sex semen from one of the 2 same bulls that went into the first treatment. So the bulls in the conventional or in group 1, the same 2 bulls were used as sex semen in the other treatment in the 60/40 demonstration group. And then we used a straw of terminal conventional semen on anything else in that group. So essentially, we had 2 groups of 250 cows, so we bred about 500 cows a year for 4 years in this project. So I started to kind of dig through the data, comb through the data about what's important in this data that I thought that folks would want to use as a take home here. Clearly, we know that there's a step back in terms of conception rate with the female sex semen versus the conventional semen, right? And that's probably going to range from 5 to 10 points of conception rate, depending on bulls. There's examples of bulls that'll do higher on sex semen, and there's examples of bigger differences than that, but you probably need to bank on somewhere in the range of 5 to 2 points drop in conception rate in this scenario anyway. Again, 4 years of data. Essentially what I'm showing you in this graph is in the blue bars is the number or the percentage of AI sired heifer calves from the maternal bulls that were generated per cow exposed. And so as you can see, that kind of floats from 26 up to close to 30% across the years of this trial. In the background, in the red shaded area is the replacement rate used at the Bear Ranch. So they're keeping back and breeding about 24% of their mature cow herd as replacement heifers in a given year. And so I think the take home message is here that with this protocol, we're able to exceed their threshold kind of needs for replacement heifers in any given year of the project. You know, they're obviously none of the products on the market are going to have a perfect skew rate, so we do average about a 90% female calves born from the sex skewed semen in this particular trial. 28% females, again, from 60% of the cows inseminated with female sex skewed semen, we end up with about 28% of those females giving birth to a female heifer calf. And again, we did exceed that target in every year of the project. This next one, in terms of the outcome, I think gets at the question a little bit of what are we doing to the calving season by doing this, right? Because there's obviously some concern that if you don't get the high conception rate in the first service, you know, does that drag out your calving season down the road? And I think what we see here, at least the way that I interpret these graphs of the first 3 calving season of this project is that really, yeah, we see that slight decrease in relative proportion of cows calving on that first wave. But when we get out to that second wave, we largely make up to that for that. And you get out to the end of the second cycle here, there's not a huge difference between the 2 treatment groups. So the blue here is going to be your conventional AI kind of a scenario, and the pink is going to be more of the 60/40 treatment. So I think to me, this was really reassuring that we weren't doing something really detrimental to a calving season. And I think this, kind of gives me hope that we can keep moving down a path similar to this. As we start to think about then what genetics we put into a system like this, I think we got to rethink some of our genetic sort of, I guess, the tools that we're using to select the genetics that go into this. We look around the industry today, and we've got a lot of all-purpose type indexes out there for cattle that, and for sure, almost all the indexes make some kind of an assumption that a portion of the cattle are going to slaughter at the end of this thing, right? There's a few that don't. But if you don't go there, then I think there's also a tendency for our inputs or our indexes to focus on output. And I think we need a heavier focus on the inputs to drive that maternal efficiency piece if you're going to be making replacement females. And again, that's my bullet point here. The other thing is, though, as you go back to Mark's talk, then if you've created all your replacement females out of that first wave, both your AI sires and your terminal cleanup bulls are really the only limitation on the kind of terminal performance that you can put into those bulls is around calving needs and what that female can have without having a dystocia problem, right? So you can move traits a long ways, I think, and I think we have cattle that can still generate a lot of terminal performance without causing a lot of calving issues in the industry out there today. Again, I'll harp on crossbreeding. I think implementing crossbreeding here, particularly in making those replacement females, should have really big benefits to the system. And I think this is a perfect system to do that in. Troy said this to me one day when we were talking about this, is that with sex semen, we can really start to adjust knobs and dials that we couldn't do before because we were afraid we were going to get something out of balance. Maybe it's not that we can access things that we couldn't before, but we can put pressure in places at a higher level than we've ever been able to before. I saw this particular slide from my colleague Doug Frank, talking about kind of the balancing act that we have to do when we're making those all-purpose kind of cattle, right? And please don't get hung up if you don't agree with some of my trait emphases here in these blocks, but I think the idea here is that if you get these things out of balance, maternal type traits that drive maternal function and carcass traits, profitability falls off here, right? But I think sex semen gives us a tool to start to drive the emphasis to the kind of the maternal side of this balance beam, and still keep it propped up at a profitable point. And so I think that's really kind of the whole idea of this, is to be able to kind of prop up that profitability and still be driving our selection in a more maternal direction with part of our matings. This is a little bit of playing around with the iGendex system that Troy Rowan did for me. Troy's been good enough to help analyze some of this data from the Bear Ranch for us. And really, again, I don't think that I'm necessarily proposing this as an index to select cattle on, but basically, if you go into a system and you pull out all those carcass traits and those performance traits and let it drive an index that's really about maternal profitability, you get some really heavy weightings on lo and behold on a couple things: mature cow weight and stayability, right? And if you remember back to the discussions this morning from Dr. Matchin and Bob Weber, I think you'll remember that those are the things that drive profitability. And so I think at the very least, we need an index for a system like this that looks more heavily at things like stability and input type traits, whether that's mature weight or actual cow intake, whatever we can get. I think we need to put more emphasis in that direction to drive the efficiency of the system. And clearly, I think that we need to have some emphasis on carcass traits and performance built into any index that we can use to select even the female side of this equation. Again, I don't want to beat on the crossbreeding thing too much because I think everybody has done that really well today. But breed complementarity is a huge piece of this. And while I do sort of agree that we've had a lot of convergence in terms of what our breeds look like, I do think there are individuals, particularly if you think about being able to AI, there are individuals that we can access that still offer those traits in a really complementary fashion in a system like that. I think about it, and a lot of times is it lets us use a bull for which we wouldn't want a male offspring or a female offspring. If you want to go down the other side of this path of sex semen, right? Whether that's to incorporate some Bos indicus to make a replacement female, maybe you don't want those males going into the feedlot. Whatever the scenario is, it lets us use a breed for a particular purpose that it's really made well for. As we start to think about hybrid vigor, obviously those are going to be, those traits like fertility and stability are going to be strongly impacted. And you begin to wonder if hybrid vigor starts to solve some of the other problems or be a help to some of the other problems that we have around health and fitness and feedlot cattle and those kinds of things down the road. And I think the reality is, I think this concept fits for producers across the full spectrum, right? And so if you don't think about it from purely the 60-40 concept, I think 60-40 works at kind of a smaller producer level really well to, maybe you're a one bull herd, suddenly you can make your replacement females from a different breed, you can maintain a crossbred female, and you can use whatever your terminal bull of choice is to make the output of this system. You go up to a larger ranch and maybe you implement a system where you've got a nucleus group of cows that get sex semen in the cows that were in heat, and conventional semen from the same bulls on the remainder of the cows to try to really maximize the number of females generated from a core group of productive cows in a larger ranching system. I guess moving into kind of the concluding thoughts that I have around this, I do think it's a template for a more efficient system that's possibly more sustainable and more resilient. I think the impact of taking those early born heifers, working them back into the herd, constantly having early born heifers beating your replacement females, getting them bred back early. I think that there's sort of a compounding interest effect to that, in my opinion, right? I think we're placing selection on it, and if we can concurrently be selecting on fertility type traits in the form of BPDs, I think the results should be really impressive. This idea of decoupling maternal and terminal mating decisions for me, I think is really refreshing when you stop and think about what you can do when you really focus on making exactly the right female and exactly the right end product for your market. I think we're going to get better and better at figuring out how to use this sex semen into fixed time protocols. I think the 7 and 7 sync protocols got a lot of promise in terms of the estrus response that we see from that protocol. And so I'm really happy and I guess excited about where the future, where this thing is going. And I think it's, again, I just emphasize that I think this is flexible. Don't get hung up on the 60-40 split. I think it's really more of a discussion about segmenting your cow herd to get to a point of making the right pregnancies from the right cows. I do want to just make a few acknowledgments here. The Bear Ranch has been really instrumental in generating the data that I shared there. Treston Vermandel is the manager. Dr. Mike Tess, who I'm sure a lot of you know as a consultant for the Bear Ranch. The crew there, Casey Martin and his team. Our ABS district manager, Lacey Sutherland, out there in Western Montana. Some of her reps, Travis Klein, Sandberg, and Alan Tinsman have really helped every year in this project with the Bear Ranch. Dr. Troy Rowan has been very helpful to me in terms of digging through the data. The iGenDec platform, or really pleased to have that out there as something to kind of play with in terms of thinking about where the future perfect index might be for this, and then our product development team at ABS. And so I guess with that, I'll close with this slide again because I like this one, and I think there is a fork in the road, and I think that we can take it and possibly find a way to build a slightly more efficient system.